when we're trying to explain who wins a big war like this, how much should we be looking at the specific strategies used in different battles versus just the total tonnage of industrial output that America especially contributed? And so by 1942, what is the way, even if they had much better strategy, what is the way in which Germany would have won?
Define win, right? What is win? If Germany's win means controlling the entire continent plus Britain plus Russia, you come up with one answer, right? If Hitler had just done the Anschluss, right, that's Austria joins, and maybe done the Sudeten number, which is a large German population in Czechoslovakia, and quit, he'd be called Bismarck II, a genius. Like, no losses, gets to keep that bigger area. But that's not who he is. So you need to define what win is for both the Germans and then both for the Allies to determine what's feasible and what's not feasible. Germany is potentially can be invaded overland everywhere, whereas Britain can't. And then Germany just cannot deploy a navy the way Britain can. It's just geography. And therefore, Germany should have bought a completely different navy, skip the surface fleet, buy a lot more U-boats. Maybe they would have zapped the British before the United States gets its act together in either world war, right? Do it fast. They didn't do it.
I found your thesis that Britain fought this very effective maritime strategy really interesting, but let me just try out a different theory for you.
All right, counter argument. Here we go. Yes.
So after the fall of France in June 1940, Germany has all these U-boats, and they're actually themselves running a very effective maritime strategy. They're not in the Atlantic, they're not in the narrow seas, right? They can actually go to the ocean and cut off British trade through the Atlantic. In October, October of 1940, I think they sink like close to 400 or 500,000 tons.
It's huge.
Of British shipping. So, the Germans are running this like a very effective blockade of Britain, and the reason it fails is just that the Americans eventually can just produce many more ships than the Germans can even sink. And so ultimately, it wasn't a matter of who ran the better maritime strategy. It was just that who could keep up the industrial output to sustain this strategy. So it comes back to industry and not strategy. Even for these maritime operations, I'm curious to get your take.
It's not. They're not blockading Britain. Britain's getting all its stuff out, but then they get sunk somewhere else. Blockade is when you're actually keeping things in. So Germany has exactly zero merchant marine going anywhere. Right. The stuff that you're talking about being sunk, they're naval ships, but a lot of it is merchant marine because the British are getting things out. Tremendous amounts of it are getting out. So that's just a difference. And then you're correct about the importance of productive bases. Britain's problem in World War II that's different from the Napoleonic Wars is when you change to oil as what's powering your ships and things, Britain doesn't have that at home. Whereas coal, it does. It has some A-list coal. And so when you're doing Age of Sail and coal, the British are okay. But then when you're changing energy sources, they're definitely not okay. So there are other factors that are going in with them. But you're right about the productive base. But then there's another game to play, which I think is worth playing. It's the game of takeaway. So you're telling me there's this factor which is economic size, and it's decisive, that this will determine the outcome of wars. And you're absolutely right that it's important. Air power enthusiasts will say, no, that's nonsense. It's all about controlling the skies. That when you control the air and you got air cover for your convoys, that's what does it. So let's talk about why the Battle of the Atlantic turns out the way it is. If I take away cryptography, would it have turned out the same way? Negative. If I take away not just sheer amount of technology, but certain key pieces like radar and those things, what happens? Does it change? Yes, it does. What happens if the United States just doesn't like alliances, that you don't coordinate things particularly well? Does it change things? Yes, it does. You can go through a list of this, of different people are designing different types of ships, and are also determining that you're going to share things with Britain. Britain's providing a lot of free stuff. So if you remove any one of these things, that battle Atlantic turns out differently. So the story is, it's probably a package of
Mm,
many things. And this whole game of takeaway, when you have people who will come up with a monocausal explanation for you, they'll go one cause, and they'll probably be right that their one cause is really important, but then they're just ignoring all these other things.
mm.
So that's the more important thing in strategy. So your thing is it's truly important.
Mm. I guess the question then is, what does changing things mean? Does it mean that the war could have gone on longer, shorter, etc.? Yes, of course, anything would have changed that. There's another question of, would it have changed who won the war? And I'd claim that cryptography, radar, even oil, even if Germany had a huge reserve of oil, maybe it would have lengthened the length at which Germany could have sustained itself. But if you change the fact that the Axis had 1/4 of the GDP of the Allies combined, I think that switching that genuinely changes who wins the war, whereas these other things actually wouldn't change who won the war.
Well, it depends whether the war is a war for limited or unlimited objectives, because you can play that game with the Russo-Japanese War. Japan, all the data you talk about Japan, it's a fraction of Russia, and Russia gets trounced in the Russo-Japanese War. So there's something up what's going on, whereas Japan's having a very limited objective, and Russia has other problems at home and is willing to bail. That's one thing. But there's another thing. If Germany had simply never bought a surface fleet, if they'd been sensible. Surface fleet, yeah, it's great Britain's got one, but it can always deploy that thing. Germany will never deploy its surface fleet. It'll get it sunk, which is what happened in the Norwegian campaign. At least from the German point of view, they got Norway out of it. But if they had simply bought U-boats instead, I don't know whether it would have. You'd have to do the math, and I haven't done that. Of what their goal would need to be is to knock Britain out before the United States ever gets
Right.
into the war. Oh, definitely do not declare war on the United States, because maybe if you can keep the commerce rating going for another 6 months, maybe Britain falls. Maybe that's the pivotal error. It has nothing to do with what you're talking about. It's simply Hitler shouldn't have declared war. I don't know, but there are many factors that go into these things, and that's why it's a reason why you should listen to people who disagree with you, that they may see some of these other factors, right? Um, we all have blind spots, and we rely on other people to find them, but then you have to be receptive to listening.
If you enjoyed this clip, you can watch the full episode here and subscribe for more clips. Thanks.